This is TWiT.
In terms of monopoly, there are people who are really worried about monopoly even if they don't care about tech. And they don't know it, but they're all on the same side. Like, I take off my glasses and it says made in Italy because they're Oliver Peoples glasses. And Oliver Peoples is a subsidiary of a company called Luxottica, which has bought every single eyewear brand you've ever heard of, as well as LensCrafters, Target Optical, Sears Optical, the major lens manufacturer, and the major insurer. Sunglass Hut. Yeah, they own Oakley. They own Versace. They own every brand you've ever heard of. They've raised prices 1,000% in 10 years. If you need prescription glasses, you care about monopoly, even if you don't know it yet. And then, people who watch John Oliver, they know that it is
really like the frog in the boiling water because, I pay $700 for my glasses now when I only paid $150 10 years ago. But that kind of went up gradually, so I didn't really notice. And I certainly didn't know it was Luxottica's fault.
But there's a lot of people who have more urgent causes, right? Like if you're a pro wrestling fan, then you might have noticed in the last couple of years that all the wrestlers you love are begging on GoFundMe for money to pay their medical bills so they can die with dignity in their 50s from their work-related injuries. And it's because Vince McMahon bought all the other wrestling leagues. Right. There used to be 30. Now there's one. He's reframed all of his workers as contractors, and he took away their health insurance. Yeah. And so wrestling fans also have common cause. And it's like ozone layer and owls, right? There were people who cared about the ozone layer. They didn't really understand what was going on with the owls. They knew that there was something really bad going on with the ozone layer. And when they heard about the owls, they're like, that's really alarming, but I'm focused on the ozone layer. And it wasn't until we got into ecology rather than issues that people were able to say, we're all fighting for the same thing. And even though the way I'm fighting for it is by working on the ozone layer, I'm going to support the ecology movement per se. And we are on the brink of people who are worried about, concentration in meat packing. All of a sudden, that became pretty salient this year, right? As slaughterhouses also became charnel houses, where meat packers were dying and sickening due to massive concentration in the sector that allows them to treat their workers really badly. Chicken farmers have some of the highest suicide rate in the country. It's because there's only 3 major chicken packers left, and there's a process that they use called chickenization for their labor force, where the farmers are technically independent workers, but they have to buy the coop that Purdue tells them to buy. They have to buy the feed. They have to use the medicine. They have to put the chickens on the lighting schedule that Purdue specifies. And then Purdue tells them how much they're going to pay at the very end. And they get to calculate it so it's just enough to keep them growing chickens, but not enough to let them go ahead. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it's the same thing that Uber drivers have to deal with. So every sector is facing this kind of both monopoly and monopsony, where you have a buyer who's concentrated all the power among their suppliers, and you also have a seller who's concentrated all the power among the consumers. And it's like an hourglass, and there are these people who are manning the pinch between the two bulbs. And, we like to think that those of us on this side of the bulb have nothing in common with those of us on that side of the bulb. It's not true. We're all on the same side. We're on the side of people who want to get rid of the people in the middle running the pinch. And this is how we got trust busting, 100 years ago. This is how we got the New Deal, is that people woke up one day and they said, Standard Oil is the same problem as the Rail Trust, is the same problem as the Electricity Trust, is the same problem as AT&T, is the same problem as A&P. And they got together and they made common cause. And, we're coming to that moment again, or at least that's how I think we can find our way out of it.
Cory, I think if you successfully unite all of these causes into a single cause, we should retain chickenization as the word that describes what happens to the victims.
I totally agree. I learned that word from a Zephyr Teachout book that just came out called Break 'em Up, but she got it from someone else, and I forget who it is, someone who wrote a big expose on the meatpacking industry. But, it's the same thing with farmers. It's the same thing with hospitals, right? The reason that hospitals are as brittle as they are, the reason our medical system is as brittle as it is because private equity funds have been buying and merging hospitals and making them more and more debt loaded, laying off primary staff and hiring them back as contractors, doing all the stuff they did that made Toys R Us into a failing business, except it's our entire healthcare system, such as it is in this country. So,
it's also where J.C. Penney went, and Sears, yeah.
Yeah.
What's happening? What's actually the good thing about COVID-19 is all the fractures in society are being brought to the surface because they are brittle. And all it took was a little crack and the whole thing is starting to shatter and it doesn't look good. It's I fear though that it's gonna be a very disruptive period of several decades as we work this all out. And I'm not at all. I'm not at all convinced that your side's going to win. I feel like the pinch has a lot of power, and it's interesting how you bring up the word ecology, because the other thing that they do is they change the language. So it used to be everybody was against pollution. Nobody's for pollution, but you change it to climate change. Well, now we can have a debate. And so there are all sorts of techniques that the people in power use to keep us from revolting against the chickenization of the world. Very interesting. Well,
that's why I call
stuff.
it the climate emergency instead of climate change.
Yeah, that's a better way.
I think it's a good term for all of us to adopt.
Yeah. Nobody's against pollution. Nobody's for pollution. Everybody's against pollution. But climate change, well, who knows what that is? Maybe it's just a natural force.
It changes all around you.
It's normal, right?